Hi, we are looking at admin views, which is the next thing to be setting up in developing your component. So first we started with field types, looking at how to set up field types or improve upon them. Then we looked at how to use those field types to build basic common fields. Now we're going to look at how to take those fields and add them to admin views. Now, admin views, like I explained in our initial general planning video, it is basically forms the bedrock, the basis of your component's database structure. So your admin views is where your database structure is being developed. All your admin views will each have their own table. Now, as we explained, admin views have a single name and it has a list record or a plural name. And then there's a system name. And the reason why they actually have three is that, let's say you want to reuse this specific admin view in another component with the same name, but obviously adapting it to that component. The idea would be that you would then have two preacher showing up in your selection list when you add it to the component, and so that might be difficult to discern which is which, and so you can add the name of that specific component as part of just the differentiating between the same names. That means you can have admin views with the same names but with different implementation. In fact, that is how you can do different version control concepts on components, using the same admin view, just inside of it making a few changes and then saving it with a little so you could do that you could open Preacher, for example, and in here you could say free version. This is the free version, and then save as copy, and then you can change the fields that is linked. You can change some of the linked views. You can change some of your CSS or whatever other things you have done regarding this admin view, and then go to the free version of that component and link that specific one and that specific view instead of the other. Anyway, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I usually do. So let's focus on admin views now. To create an admin view, you obviously just click new. I'm gonna open Preacher again because this is the one we're using as our illustration, and you would see that there should be a name for single record. Again, that is where you would edit this record, so that is, in this case, I said Preacher, and then there's a list of records, and that's Preachers. Then a short description and a normal just description, depending on what you would like to say. Then there is a type. Now the read write and the read only changes the component's editing view. If you say read only, then it will basically limit the fields to being you will not be able to edit them. If you remember in this area right here, the modified by field cannot be edited because it's done automatically, and when it was modified is also updated as every time you click save. So this area can't be edited, and that's how all the fields are gonna look if you select read only. If you leave it on read write, it will look like this, and you'll be able to edit it. Okay, so that is looking at these fields. Now there's a place for an icon. If you hover over the icon, it gives you the dimensions that is needed, and this basically is the icon. Then when you look at the dashboard, these icons are the ones selected there. Okay, so you can see there the icon has two of them. One is the add icon and one is just the normal icon. So if I hover here, you should see the image if it is set in your images folder. Sorry. So if you open this, it goes to your image folder. You select the icon, and when you hover here, obviously those images aren't in this image folder, so it doesn't show up. And then if you're going to add preachers, if you're going to add a field, just a field called category that is of the category type, then you should add a category icon. Since then the system will automatically know, okay, there needs to be a category set up, and it'll look for this icon to use for that category. And if you select a category field that is a general category for the whole component, which isn't directly linked to this view, then it will take the first view. The system will look at which view, when it processes it, which view is the first one, and usually that would be the first one you've created, and it will use the icon in that view. But to be on the safe side, if you're using one category for them all, just set the same icon on them all. But if you are going to use a category which is primarily focused on the preachers, and you're just going to put preachers in a category, then you need to add a category icon here for categories. Now the permissional switch is got to do with your accessing and updating of data. So like you can see here, we have view edit state, view edit own, views create, admin views delete, admin views access, admin view edit version. Now this edit, if you're in this managing group and it's set to allowed, then you can edit it. If you are a guest and it's set to deny, then no matter where you are, in the front or the back of the site, you won't be able to edit this information. Even if you have a direct link, it won't allow you to edit it. Now it also has view access, so somebody who might be not allowed to edit it might be allowed to view this content in the back end in the list view. Then it will show in the list view and they can see that it is there. Now you might think to yourself, why would they ever want to do that? And you see, because of your custom admin views and the way that you can connect them to your admin views, which we'll look at later, you might want to display the record and just leave a custom admin link to the data. Let me show you an example of a component that does that. You see here, there is a button underneath the company name. So it displays the record, but if I was like this one whose profile is set to being locked, if I was to click on this, it'll tell me that I do not have the permission to edit it. But if I was to click on this icon, it actually loads the information that I'm looking for. And that is the difference. The difference is sometimes you want to use a custom. See, this is a custom admin view, and you might want to do something that is not an editing view but a custom view, and then you would want to be able to see the record but not edit it. So that's really what that is all about. Okay, so we are back here and we are looking at permissions. So opening this permission tab, you'd see that there's edit, view edit own, view edit state, and all these have been created. Usually when you open this, it might look like that. Let me show you. Yeah, it will look like that. So you would set the first one, and then you would see there are two options. One is core edit and one is view edit. The core edit means that you want to do a global switch. Now let me try and explain that by opening let's see, composer builders options. We haven't actually looked at this yet, but it's quite important. You'd see that in all components in Joomla you have what is called the create, edit, delete, edit state, edit own. This list of options, which means that if you select this, that they can't create something, then it is applicable to everything in this component because it's a global setting. So everything that doesn't have a view name behind it, like this is a view name, okay, and it says access. This is a view name and it says batch use, but this says only batch use. So that's the global for batch use, and this is only related to this view. So you can say I'm allowing them to do a batch function, but in this admin view I don't want to allow, I don't want to allow them to do a batch function. Or you could say, you know what, I want to use inheritance, so that means I'm gonna do that. I want them to be able to do batch functions here and in this view. Now the reason why you can do it in two places then is that you have a global switch to stop them from doing it, but you can also locally to the view tweak whether they are able to edit or do some of these features. So coming back to the way that you would set that up, if you don't want to have a separate control for this view in relation to whether they could edit it or whether he could change it or view it, or all these possibilities, then you would use core. And core would mean that you would have only this one switch, and if you say deny, it will automatically deny it for that view and any other view that is using core, or core can be seen as global. When you are setting it as view, edit view, it means that the system will generate a specific list of items specially just for that view. So if you look from there to there, that's for your admin view. From there to there is for your custom admin view. Now that means when I set up this in a component builder, I selected view edit, and then I said in relation to each record, in relation to the whole view, and I selected both. So then it will implement it for both in a single record, and it will implement it for your global settings. Now again, it might feel I won't blame you if what I have just tried explaining makes you feel confused, but really the only way for you to make sense of this is if you know how Joomla's permissional structure works. So if you are using a Joomla website and you have actually ever gone to articles and opened options and then looked at their permissions, then you'd see that they only have create, edit, delete, edit state, edit own, and then these accessing of the control in this big global settings. Now what we are doing is we simply adding more control than only these defaults, because the way this works in Article Manager, you basically have one view, okay, and that view is articles. These other views as categories is another view, but it really is another component. It's not really the content component. And admin features is just another implementation. It's not really a whole new database. Okay, so the point is you only really have two, or at the most two views here. And so when they look at options, they know that if they tweak this permission, they want it to be implemented for all the views related to articles, right? Well, with Component Builder, you're able to build components that are far bigger than the content managing article manager, okay? And because of that, we felt that your permissions must extend, that you can target a specific view and not just all of them at once. So if you want to target a specific view, you will select the view edit. Actually this view prefix must be in your selection. If you select core, that means you are saying I don't want to specifically target this view. If I change it in the global settings, which would be the ones without a view name in front, so everything from here to there, those are the global settings: global export, global batch, global version, edit version, global create, delete, edit state. Now edit state is changing it from published to unpublished, those things. Edit own means he might not have edit rights, but he has edit own rights. So that means whatever he creates, he can edit again. And then created by is a field. So can he edit the created by field? Or can he edit the create date field? Now, you'd see that this basically targets fields that are sort of the default fields. There is a way to target custom fields, fields that were developed outside of the default fields. But that is not done in here. I'll show you where that is done. This is just controlling your default fields and your default features with regards to permissions. And so you would first set up these permissions. Make sure that you set up all of those that you want to implement. There is a list here of those I think is most general. This list might grow with time, but because we've moved the control of a single field out of this structure, it actually means that we've made it scalable. So this permissional implementation here is really only targeting your default fields, or the fields that already the system puts in for you, and the default concepts like accessing the specific view, or deleting an item in the view, or creating an item, or editing the created field, or editing the created by field, changing the state, edit own. So those are the custom default features. If you want to do a control on a specific field, I'll show you that in a moment. But that is the implementation of permissions. If you do not really understand this, I would suggest you make effort to study up on Joomla's own implementation, of the permissional structure. Then once you've really understood the way Joomla handles this permissional structure, then you would have better grips on setting up these permissions per view. What is done in the code, if you would like to see that, is basically in the code. If you already have developed a component, you'd see that it sets up your globals. This is the global. Now when I say global, I mean if you click on options, let me just close this. If you click on this button here, options, in any of the components, you're going to the global settings. Okay, and these permissions here are those first that I've highlighted. So it's all those, and they have links to the specific views. So there's the field view, there's the dynamic get view, there's the custom admin view, and you can see that they have their related switches. Okay, but then there's also for each view their own section, and that causes Joomla to add in an item a permissional tab with switching to control the permission for this one individual item. And we have tried our very best to implement these permissions actually the way that one might expect. I can in later videos go into the code and show you exactly how this permissional structure is being implemented, and I think it's one of the features that makes Component Builder far more advanced than other component builders out there, is the ability to add permissional structures to your component right inside of Component Builder through this permissional switch. Okay, and so we'll definitely be speaking about this permissional structure as we go along. The tab structure, if you look at these, we call them tabs: settings, fields, CSS, JavaScript, PHP, MySQL, published, and permissions. Now published and permissions are the tabs that are built automatically for all backend admin views. All admin views have this permission, and the permission only if set, and published will always be there. In published, we basically bundle the fields that are built dynamically or without you having to set them. I think that's what you could say. With publishing, all those fields that you do not need to set are always placed in publishing. And so everything else, this MySQL tab here, the PHP, JavaScript, CSS, fields and settings are actually an example of what tabs can be. Now in Preacher, I actually set up two tabs, one called Details and one called Sermons. Okay, so there are two tabs in Preachers. So that means if you were to open the Preacher backend view, the first one would be called Settings, the second one will be called Sermons, and then you would see Publishing and Permission. So that's how it will look. Now when you create fields, you'd see that there is a column here called Tab, and you then will select the number. Now the tags are numbered from 1 to whatever. We don't start in 0, although that might have made more sense for programmers. We started with 1. So first tab, second tab, and because we are using a place different from the tabs, we don't use the names. So you need to remember that this is tab 1, this is tab 2. And so when you set up a field, you need to tell us in which tab do you want to place that field. Okay, so that is what this tab number here is all about. Now you might say, but where is tab 2's information, because there's sermons, right? Well, because of the fact that sermons is an actually a table on its own. If we go out here, we will see that there is a admin view called Sermon, and it is its own backend view, and it has its own structure. So how can I get the sermons that is only related to this Preacher to be showing in the second tab called Sermons? Well, we created a thing called linked views. Now linked views is the place where this is done. So basically I selected Sermon as the view. I said it should be placed in the second tab, and then child key is Preacher. So if I think about Sermons, which is the child, Sermon is the child, Preacher is the parent. So you would always think of the parent as the view in which you are the moment you are setting up the linked view. So if you are in Preacher, the parent is Preacher. If you are in Sermons, the parent is Sermon. So it depends on in which view you are busy editing. And so here, when we talk about the child key, this would be the database field name that is to be looked at, and the parent field name that should be found inside of this. So when we look at Preachers, you would let's go back to Sermon. Let me quickly close this. Okay, we got Sermon open here, and if I open his fields, well, I don't need to open it here. In fact, let me use another place. It's easier to see. Let's go to fields. You'll see that there is a field called name. Okay, wait, there's a field called Preacher. Where is it? Preacher. Next page, possibly. No. Why am I not seeing it? Custom. There it is. Sorry. Okay, so this is the field that we want to connect the two with each other, right? So to get the sermons that belongs to that Preacher, we need to get the ID of this field. Now that's a custom field, and we said that we are going to look at custom fields only after explaining the admin views. So I'm not going to go into detail now, but I'm going to open that field nonetheless, and I'm going to show you that its name is Preacher. And because that field will be connected to Sermon, it means that in the database, the ID, which is the key field, is going to be saved in Preacher. So that means the ID of the Preacher is saved inside of the Preacher column in the database. Now let me show you that in the database itself. Okay, so here I am in the database with sermon distributor, and I'm opening sermons, and you'd see that we would scroll until we see preacher, and it has IDs in it. And those are the IDs of the preachers themselves. So if I was to go to preacher, it basically means that we are linking to this ID here. Okay, so going back to our linked view concept, that means the child database table in which the ID of this preacher must be found is in preacher. The parent key would be this preacher's ID. And so by doing that, the linked view will only show the sermons that are related to this specific preacher. And that is how the linked views can be linked. If you didn't select these correctly, it won't load all of them. Okay, it won't work well. So there needs to be that tight relationship between the parent and the child view. So there's also a way to actually link from an array. So let's say the person is able to select more than one preacher. There is a way for you to also type that, but that would all be dealt with in advanced concepts. Since that is, well, I could explain some of it here, but best be, let me show you. That would be one of the syntax to use, but like I said, I think I possibly need to deal with this in advanced concepts, because who will know to look for the answer in this video or tutorial. So we'll stay with the basics here. So the basic way of linking another view would be to select that view from this drop down, then say in which tab it should display, then what is the child's database table in which to look, what is the parent's value to use to build a relationship, and then this add new button or no is basically then when you look at a let me just close this. When you look at fields here, you see it as a new button. So you can, in that switch there, decide whether it should show it or not. I should tell you that if you say yes, and you have in that view created the correct permissional structure for whether somebody can create an item, you can control the display of that new button with just setting the permission of that user specific group. So if that user is in a group that doesn't have permissions to create new items for in this example for preachers or for sermons, then that new button will also not show up. So we have that permissional wrapped around that button's display methods. Okay, that is the tabs. Just looking at the tabs, that's really what we were looking at, and then explaining to you how to link custom view, or sorry, other views to other views, so that you can have the data displayed inside of each other. Basically this feature we have here. So the fact that we are busy in preachers and we are able to display the fields that are being used. Well, as you can imagine, these fields are linked to preachers from this column here. So we are using a repeatable field structure, and we are able to connect the field names to this view. Now let me show you how I did that. So looks like I'm going to show you anyway. Okay, I'm opening the admin view, which is the one we're looking at, and I'm going to linked views, and you see that I have there an R in the pointer and the word field. So if you are trying to connect a view from the parent, and in the parent it is stored in add fields, that's the database column name. So if we go to the database, we go to component builder, let's see, component builder, admin views, and we scroll, you see there's add fields, and if I open that, you see that the way it stores it is it stores the IDs, then it stores the list. So there's a way in which your repeatable fields are stored by Joomla. And the value that I need to look up is in field. So in the repeatable field called at fields, there is a field called field, and it should look for the ID of the of the fields. It's a little confusing, sorry. So it needs to look in add fields in the field array for the IDs that it needs to fetch. And the way you would map that in the connect a linked view is you would say that this is a capital R for repeatable fields. Basically that is the convention to tell the system it's a repeatable field we're looking in, and inside of the repeatable field we must look in the field array for those IDs, and they should map to the child's ID. So does that make sense? I hope so. Because that's the way it's done. And if that wasn't a repeatable field but an array, you would simply say array, and if the array is just this, the values themselves, you would drop off any pointer to the specific value. But if it's an array with and it's actually a, so if it's an associative array, you would just add the name of the associative key that it needs to look in. If it's just a normal array without association, you would leave it like that. So this would just tell the system it is an array and it needs to look inside of those values for these IDs. Okay, so that sort of explains the linking of an admin view to another admin view. Now getting on with the setting up of fields. Now, since we've already created the fields beforehand, you will usually start out this way. It'll look like that. And the fields that you have created, you would scroll down. If it's a long list, you would just start with typing that field's name, and it will sort of bring it up to you. Then it asks you whether you would like to show this field in the admin view, the admin list view. And that means if you've closed your editing area, there's a list of names here. And if you want that specific field to show up in this list, then you would select show. If you've selected show, you could tell us in which order you want this. Must it be the first one, second one? And we thought, well, you shouldn't do more than 100, it'll look ridiculous. So you can say I want this one to show up first. Now the title and alias concept in Joomla is quite interesting, and obviously it's actually needed, especially if you want to do history control or integration with Joomla's infrastructure when it comes to their history and tagging systems. You need to add a title and an alias to all your items, to all your views, especially if it's a view that is going to be used in the front. So in this case, since we are going to use preachers in the front to display a list of preachers, we're most certainly going to add a title, and we're going to use the name as the title. Then again, back to the back end, do we want to have this sortable? So do we want this thing to be clickable there? So you can click on it and it sorts the table alphabetically on the basis of this table, column. So if you want to have it sortable, then do you want to have this field be searchable? Do you want someone to type into this box? If we take warehouse, for example, and type it in there and search, do you want it to show only that specific field? So if you want them to be able to search for it, you say yes. Then the filter option is a tricky one. You don't want to set name to filtering, because then it will show a list of all the names that already is being shown in the table. You only want to use filter on things that are like a radio box or a other view, or fields that actually are not all being displayed one after the other in the table. So for our example, I added let's go to sermon distributor and preacher. I added no extra fields there, but to sermons I added preacher. So there's a list of all the preachers here. So I could sift and say, okay, I only want to see this preacher's sermons, and then it shows up only those. So that is the filters. And the way that you set up a filter is simply by clicking yes or no here, and it will set up that filter for you. Then this link, if you are setting up a custom field and you want to be able to, in the display of the list, have it clickable, so I could click here and actually go to that preacher, you see, and then click close, and then I'm back in the sermons list view. I could also click on series and it'll take me to the series, and I can edit the series immediately, and click close and it'll take me back to the list view. So if you want that feature for this specific item, then you need to tick yes here. Now usually we use the name, as you see here, to be the clickable field, the title, sorry. If you've selected title here and you click link, then you're actually telling us that this item, this field item here, is actually what we should use as the clickable option to open that actual sermon. So here we have that actual sermon opening up and all its related fields. So that is the way for us to know which field should be used as the clickable field if you have a title. Now this concept is something that you might need to play with, and since it's so easy to change it, you can just click a button here to compile your component, install it, look at its behavior, change it a little, compile it, install it, look at its behavior, and by doing that you would get a good understanding of what happens if you change these switches here. Okay, now we've said that we wanted the preacher's name and stuff under settings, and our tab for settings is the first tab. Now we're going to look at the backend setuping of where you want to have the fields display. Now there are these different placing options: left in tab, right in tab, full width in tab, above tab, underneath tabs, left of tabs, right of tabs, and then there is the order in which it should go. That means if we look at this again, this is left in tab, this is right in tab. I think I have another view that goes beyond some of those parameters. Let me go to this one, and we do a question. So that is right of tab, not in tab. You see there is an option it says right in tab, left in tab, and then it says left of tabs and right of tabs. Now that means that you can put it outside of the tab area, so even if I was to click here, it will remain displayed right there on the side, and that is to put it right of tab. Now there's also a left of tab area over here. Then above tab is this one here, that's above the tabs, so it also shows all the time. And then there's underneath tab. So we basically added the option of placing data. Let me just show you at the right in tab, left in tab, and then right off, right off tab and left off tab, and above tab and beneath tab, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positions in the back end of your template. And the places are being set simply by these alignment assignments here. So select the field alignment inside the tab or view, and you select these. And then once you've selected them, let's say you've selected left in, or like this one, above tab, and you've selected 1, then this is the order in which you want it to display. First this one and then that one. Left in tab, this is first. Right in tab, this one is first and then that one. And then full width is a description. Now full width will also always display under the left and right of in tab. So you need to select your left and right and then only your full width. So full width is always the last thing to show up in a tab. And then here is the switch to add permissions to these specific values. So if I was to say, you know what, I want to control which group can edit the name field, you simply need to click this yes, and that would add this field into the permissional structure dynamically. And so that is how you control the permissions of fields. That's how you add fields to a view, and those are all the different switches. Now obviously you can only have one title per view and only have one alias per view, so you should not have more than one selected. In any case, I think the system will ignore the others, but just to be safe, let me tell you to set the others to no, and then those that are actually the title to yes, and the one that is actually the alias to yes. And so we will be able to, be sure to use the correct field values. And then when you've set any of these to show, you should set the order of their display here. And okay, so there's the filter. The filter then is added dynamically by simply clicking a yes here. So if we go to sermons as an example, and we click on their fields, they have many more fields, which would help to illustrate some of these things. And you'd see that we have a sermon series, and we have it set up as a filter. So filter is the second last column. Sermon series, let's see, we've set that to yes. So that means we can sort the sermons by series. That is how you set the filters for the backend. Remember, this is primarily for the backend. Although some of the information will relate to the front eventually, especially this permissional switch, will be you'll be able to access it from the front if you need to. But this is simply to add the fields to the actual view in the backend. Okay. If you have any questions about this, please give me a heads up. If you feel I haven't done a good enough job explaining this, then let me know and I'll redo this video. So that's adding fields to the admin views. There are much more things to explain here, and I think the only thing I'll still cover in this tutorial is the actual conditions. This is an amazing feature which goes beyond Joomla's control on the show on attribute per field. Remember, we looked at the show on attribute, and the show on attribute can control which fields to show when you are clicking on other fields. So for example, here we have a field called add JavaScript. If I click yes, it opens this area, JavaScript, where I can add custom scripting. Now that behavior is being controlled by this condition structure. Now the condition structure for sermons are the following. As you can see, there's a few already being set. So what we will do is we will first decide which field are we targeting. Which field do we want to show or hide? That's the behavior. Do you want to show a field or hide a field? Now most of the time we would use show. Show means it will be hidden unless these criteria are met. So show is the one I use the most, and I think most will use that mostly. Now here is the list of all the fields in your system. Now you might say, why don't you just show the fields that I've selected as part of this view? And unfortunately that feature isn't in place yet. So you need to remember which fields you've selected in the fields area. And so for our purposes it's these fields. And you need to remember their names. And then when you go to the conditions, when you type a field like name, you need to know, oh, it's this one. That's how you would link to them. Now I've bold on option for files is a field, and I wanted to show, now this isolate and chain function is a concept which I believe would be best explained when you think about that not only one field must be used to show the other one, but more than one field. So in this case, Dropbox AutoNote in sermons should not only show when field source is Dropbox, but also when build option is automatic. So that both of these should be true before it shows the Dropbox note. And so you would select the field you want to control. Obviously you can control more than one at a time, but the logic behind this might not always work, so you need to try it, test it. If it doesn't work, come and tweak this until you find it working and behaving the way you expect. So most of the times you will only link one field to one validation, but as soon as you have multiple fields, you'll use the chain option. So it's either isolate, like this one. The build option of files should show when file source is Dropbox, and it's isolated, it isn't connected to any of the other settings here. As soon as you click chain, it means any other field that has this, any other row, this is a row that has this field selected as well, will be chained together, so that it must be both being validated as true before it actually will show the field. So here, let's look at it. It says file source, and you can select any of these. If you know that this file source is a list, then you can look at, okay, this is a list, and see the list options. So this is only for text, and it says that only for text fields, only for text fields, only for text fields, only for text fields. This is only for list and radio and checkboxes and dynamic lists. This is only for list, radio, and checkboxes. This is only for list, radio, and checkboxes. So, and then you can say is or is not. So if it is Dropbox, then it should show. If it is not Dropbox, then it should show. That is the logic behind it. Now here, this one is when you're dealing with a dynamic list. Unfortunately, with dynamic list, it's quite difficult to set these values since they are dynamic. And so the best way to deal with a dynamic would possibly be to leave this blank. So that means that if any of the values are selected, show this item. We'll still look at dynamic or custom fields. Dynamic lists or custom fields, and we will explain to you how to set up those custom fields, but that is basically what that option is for. Most of the time we are using this is, and we are, when you select that specific field, let me show you. So if I select file source, so you would select, let's do that again. If the field that you've selected is a text field, the system will show you that by saying keywords or length. So you could say, I want, if he has put in a length of 2 characters, then show. So then you take keywords away. So then that's how you can use the text field. Now you would change this to active, that is active, and that it has a length of 2. That's what that would mean. If you know that what you've selected is a list, it will show you the list, but it will show you all the values, and then you can remove the values that you don't want to use. And the only value that's really important is that 2. The others are just for you, so you could even just leave 2. That will be the same as that. We are just showing you, in fact what I do is I explode the string at the pipe, and I only use the first value to develop the JavaScript. In fact, the JavaScript that is being written, we are in the sermons view. Let me show you that. So we would go to component builder, admin, components, sermon distributor, modules, forms, and then you'd see there are 2. There's the XML, which is the fields, and then there is a JS, which is actually the JavaScript. So we open that, and here is all the JavaScript that component builder would build. Now if we look at this, let's go there, it's only these permissions, sorry, these what did I call that, conditions. Okay, so these are the conditions. It's not even that long of a list, but to implement these conditions, component builder builds this JavaScript. So it starts up here, and all of this JavaScript is the implementation of those things that we set there, all the way down to there. Okay, so that means about 500 lines of JavaScript gets written by component builder just by these switches that you set up here. Now I'm showing you where the script is being written, so that once you've set up these switches, you can come into the script, and if you remember the field name that you are working with, so for example, let's look at it, build option is the field and file source. So let's look if we can find that here. There is source. Okay, so it gets the value when the page is ready. It checks the jform underscore source, what is the value, and it puts it in here. And our first function, obviously I'm using a random function name generator, as you can see, and it starts with V, and the next one would be VW, and so on and so on. And okay, so that means you need to now to see how we implement this function, this hiding and showing of the source. You would search for the V function by just adding a bracket there and search. Okay, so it's the first function, and I'm basically saying, is it set? If it's set, then I add a source constructor, and if it's an array, is this an array? Checking the value whether it's an array. If it's not an array, I put it into a temporary array. Here we go. Let me see. There, we push it into the temporal array. If it is an array and it isn't set, we just create a blank array. Then we do a validation here, and again, this you can go check. So basically the function is that one. So let's check that function, and all that function does is it checks, is it 2? If it's 2, returns true. If it's not 2, it returns false. So you see, it's quite simple. And the value, whether true or false, is returned to source. We put source into if, If it's true, then we close that view. Sorry, we get the closest class called control group, and we check, is this field required? If it's required, then these are some homeworks that we do. Now if it's false, then we hide it, and this also, if it's required, we do some house cleaning. So that is simply a quick looking at the code which is being generated just by this one switch. This is not the only code. There is another place, and that is in the view itself. So we could go to view and then preacher. Oh wait, we're looking at sermon. Then template and edit. And then from around here we have JavaScript again. And again we have on key up for source or on change, because I'm not the system doesn't know, is this a text field or is this a list field or what is it. So we have these two check functions on it. And also, let me see, there is another place where source is going to be used for another function. So we're just focusing on this one. And so it gets the value and it runs that function which is in our JavaScript file. So here's the JavaScript file, there's the function. So it's reusing the same function the moment that there is a key up or a change on that specific field. So that's what I've done. Obviously, if other developers who are more advanced in JavaScript than I am gets involved, I could show them where in Component Builder the script is being generated, and we can improve this dramatically. I am not that good at JavaScript, and in fact I feel like I'm most probably a little bit resource intensive here, but this is the best I could do so far. And obviously if we can improve it, and if you know how to improve this, then you're welcome to get involved on GitHub and start with discussion on improving this infrastructure. I can tell you that this infrastructure is done in the compiler, of course, and I can show you exactly on which line this was developed, built. In fact, all you need to do is when you compile your component, just if we go back to components, close this. Okay, here we're inside a component. All you need to do to know where that is being built is just tick this to yes, and then it will add in the comments, it will add a line reference of where that specific script is being built. Okay, let's go back to the admin views. We're not really finished. So this is the structure that you can use to actually manipulate the conditions upon which fields should show or not show. And I really think we have done a very good implementation here. It gives you so much possibilities of structuring and chaining and working with fields in its relationships. If you want to not use this and just use the on show, then that is also going to work just as well. In fact, I think it will work better. The only problem with the on show is that it doesn't actually provide the ability to target a text field like we have here, where you can add a keyword and say, okay, if he types in his, for example, then immediately this other field will show up, which is an excellent feature. I mean, I don't think you can get that kind of intricacy with the show on option. And furthermore, it cannot look at multiple other fields if they have this certain values, and if it validates true, then only show the other field. Those kind of controls are not yet available in the show on implementation, as far as I know. And yes, I possibly would like to get involved on the Git repo of Joomla and see if we can add these nice features. But for now, we've added them to Component Builder, and in Component Builder you can implement these, and we are writing the JavaScript to manage this for you. Okay, so that is your conditions for fields. So we've looked at all of these. The next one is basically the list of the fields that you have already selected, and clicked save. It will show a list of all the fields that you've selected. Again, any of those fields, if you want to update them, you can just click on the field name and it'll take you to the field and you can update it. The next tab is a place for you to add custom CSS that is just related to this specific view. So you could add CSS here, which is for the edit view or the single view, and you can add CSS here, which is for the list view or the multiple view, views plural, and then it will be placed in its respective places. The same goes with the JavaScript, except that you have 4 places to target instead of just 1. If you remember, when we looked at the way that we are building the JavaScript, there is a file, a JavaScript file, which just has JavaScript for the view, and then there is the footer area, which is under the HTML and PHP. At the end of the file, there's a whole area which is just JavaScript at the footer of the file. And so we decided to add the option of adding JavaScript to the file or JavaScript to the footer of the view or the file, or sorry, the view file or the view footer, or the views file or the views footer. So it just gives you the option of targeting. If you know, listen, this script can run, is a function, and I just want it to be able to be on the page, then you add it to the file. And then if you want to use the function, you can add it to the footer. That is up to you. Okay. Then there is a PHP area, and here you have the option of adding JavaScript to your editing view primarily. So if we look at editing views, the moment you click on add JavaScript, it opens a tab, and now the way that we implement JavaScript, sorry, not JavaScript, Ajax, the way that we want to implement Ajax is primarily via the controller and method implementation. So if I explain that to you, the component has a controller called ajax.json PHP. You can open that. Come on. And then it has a model. Let's just close that, which is called Ajax. Okay, so you have a controller and you have a model. Now the controller is like the gatekeeper. He first does a few checks and balances to ensure that the data is correct, that that the token is right, that if you have set this to be validating whether he is a user, then it also checks that there's a user ID. If you have set it that it doesn't require him to be a user, it basically would drop off this validation. I'll show you that in a moment. But so this is so that you can that you can follow me. There is a controller area, and then there's a model area, and the model is basically a place where you can write a method which is queried from the controller. So you can see in the controller it basically is getting the Ajax model, and then it is querying a method in that model called Dropbox. So here we are querying the Dropbox method, and it's getting the view name there. It seems that I'm not even really using it. Let me just make sure here. Yeah, at the moment I'm not even using this variable, but it's nonetheless, it is here, and I possibly will use it later if it becomes necessary. So I'm basically just activating this method to run, and when this method runs, it triggers some global methods to run, and on the return of that value it triggers another local method. So again, I'm not trying to teach you PHP here. All I want to show is that this part of the code was custom written. So if we go back to our component, you'd see that there is that code. So when you click on Ajax, you add that name as a basically writing a method. Make sure that it's set to public, and you write your method in here, and in the Ajax input you would say, okay, listen, the task name is check Dropbox listing, the values I want to pass it is view and type, and both of them are integers, and it needs to run, the view needs to run a Dropbox method, and the type needs to run an update Dropbox, and both of them should check whether this is a user. So only users can fire these backend methods, and you can see that you have control to tick that. Obviously the filters are the same as with any field that you can select, and so integer here would be fine, and if there's no value you set null. Now this task name is what you'll be using in your JavaScript. So I first wanted to show you the PHP side, and then the task name itself. Okay, so let's just make sure I do not miscommunicate here. The method name is set here, and that should correspond to the method that you've set up in your Ajax method, PHP Ajax method, which is possibly the method in which you model the data, get the data, structure the data, and give it back to the Ajax call. So you return the data inside of this method. But in your JavaScript you will be using the task name to get to the system. So if we go to the JavaScript, I'll close out and go JavaScript. Oh my, did I tick something here? Well, it seems I used the JavaScript example, which is going to get way ahead of us, but since we've started, let me not leave you in midair. So I'll have to close out here, and I'm going quite ahead of myself now, but I need to, otherwise you'll feel very lost. In Sermon Distributor, which is the component to which that view belongs, there is a place called scripts, and I have added a feature which is called chronic global events. So I have added a feature to add global events. Now global events, or the way I am implementing it, is simply an event that should run every time a page opens. Anytime any page in the system opens, I want it to run the global event. Now the way I target it is I say load Dropbox Ajax. Okay, it's a global event, and it needs to do that. And the Dropbox Ajax is basically set up in the helper class. So I have a helper class which is called load Dropbox Ajax, and it gets the document object. It takes the document object, it adds a script declaration to it, and here is the JavaScript that it's adding. And you'd see that in that it is using check Dropbox listing as the task. So it's targeting the Ajax controller and asking for check Dropbox listing as the task, and it's passing to it a token and the view name. So possibly we would like to use that view ID later to log from which area this automated feature mostly gets triggered. I'm not doing that as yet, so this is just what the script will do. So there's some jQuery which only fires after the page is loaded, and at the moment it's just adding a dummy 3 in there to just trigger the method. And so that is really how the script ends up on the page, and I'm sorry that I used that as an example. I realize it's a little bit ahead of ourselves, but nonetheless I wanted to not leave it at a loose end, so I am redoing it actually for you. That is where this PHP script really gonna be used. So since I need to add this somewhere, I just selected a view, and that to our advantage it was the sermon view, and I added the Ajax controller concepts here, but the actual JavaScript that fires off all this is set to the global event, and that means every time a backend area is opened in this component, it loads that JavaScript to the view, and the JavaScript executes an AJAX request which starts updating the Dropbox listing. Now, I'm not going to explain all of that Dropbox listing to you now. It's a quite advanced concept, but it's basically sermon distributor is able to link to Dropbox sermons, or sorry, a media inside of a shared Dropbox folder. And this whole method here that we're looking at parses that Dropbox folder every so often to make sure that it's up to date. That's what it's all about. So that is just looking at adding AJAX. Here you can see that if you know the Joomla API, you know that it has a getItem method. It has a getItems method in the model. So in the model there's a getItem method in the editing model, and in the list model there is a getItems method. Then there's a getListQuery in the JModel list, and there is a save method. There's a post save method in the controller. There's a allow at edit method. There's a batch copy method. There's a batch move method. There's a script before delete method. There's a script after delete. And these are all PHP places in which you can dump custom scripting. So if you wanna, in the save method, now obviously again you need to know where the save method is. So if I would open sermon here and scroll down, let me see, I don't want to miss it here. Okay, so there's the getItem method, just that you know. So you can add custom scripting to the getItem method. And if I scroll down, there's the batch method, batch copy, batch move, there's the save method. And so if we go back here and we click on the save method, it says here that should run PHP here, that should run in the save method. And then you have the data, it's an array and it's called data. So if we look here, it means you're able to target that value that gets placed into save method. Okay. And I am sure that your custom value or code will be placed in before the parent saved. But if you do not know in any of those custom scripts where that code will be set, what you can do is just type it is loaded here, and then save it and compile the component, and then go look at the code, and you'll see where it is showing up. And then you can add, and you'll know, okay, I've got all these values already in the script, because all that component builder is going to do, it's just going to dump, let's say it puts it here, it will just say it is loaded here. That's how it'll look. It will just add the string. So when the component itself runs, it'll treat it as code. This is a comment, but I mean, if it was code, it'll just execute. So it is the way for you to add custom scripting right into your component, almost anywhere really. You are able to target through these switches. The post save hook is actually in the controller, not in the model. So you would go to the controller and then sermon and scroll to the bottom, and you'd see there is a post save hook, and it basically gives you the model and it gives you the valid data, and you can actually perform extra features on it. But in all these things, you should just read the description here. It says PHP here that should run in the post save hook method, and there's the object model is the data model object, and the array is the valid data is the valid data. There we go. So if you just read our little note here, then you can just start coding for it. Okay, that is adding custom scripting to the view, basically the list view as well as the each view. And then the MySQL dump area, which we looked at earlier, you can do two kinds of dumps. Now, what is this used mostly for? Well, what I found while I was busy developing is that I would be busy setting up a component and install it and then add dummy data to it to see if it works. And then every time I make a change and I uninstall that component and install the new one, because whatever change it made to the database won't be added to the database via an update. You need to uninstall the component and install it again to get the database back the way you want it. And so the only way I could save myself time is to actually say, listen, I'm going to reinstall this component, and the dummy data for sermons I would like to retain. And so I would go table and I open the tables, and it will show me a list of all the tables that are in the database at that moment. And then I would scroll to sermon, the sermon table, click on it, and it'll load the table and what it should be called in the data set. Now here is some explanation if you want to do other tables. So let's say you want to have it mapped to multiple tables, then this is the explanation on how to do that. I would not recommend doing this because possibly you will not get what you expect. And so just going with the values that it populates for you will possibly be your best call, unless those values change. And if you are making changes, adding new fields, you must realize that you need to come and reset this by clicking on something else and then clicking on it again, and that it loads the new view, the new list of fields that are related to this table, to this backend view table. And that way, when you compile the component, then Component Builder will actually grab the data from the database and build a dump file for you. Now that is the one way of doing it. It might be a little bit complex, but it has saved me tons of hours. The other way would be to just do a dump file itself. So you'd go to your MySQL, you would open the specific, let's use this thing that it's smaller, let's use field types, and you'd click on export, and then you would select a SQL format and click go, and this will create a dump file of all the data in the table, and you can basically paste that dump file in here. Now let me quickly do it. Sorry. Why is it saying that? I was looking at import instead of export. Terribly sorry. So you click export, click quick, then SQL and go, and then just save it. Then go to that file and open it. And having it open, you just replace this string with hash underscore so, and then replace all. And you will not use the table structure because that is already in the database, in Component Builder. You just use this area here. So basically you would copy this area, it's quite big, like that, cut, and come here, paste, and click save. And that will mean that you have the dump file, and it will always be added to your new install. If a dump file is way too big, you will see it by just after you've clicked save. Come and look at the end and see if it cut it off somewhere. So let's say it cut it off there, then I know, oh, my dump file is too big for it used. Let's just make sure. Component builder, admin view, structure. For your dump file, I use medium text. So let's see, medium text. Yes, all the medium text are down here. Post, save, hook, save, short description, batch. Okay, there it is, SQL. I used medium text, so that means it's quite big. You can really put a lot of text inside of it. If you want to know exactly how much, just Google it and you'll see. Okay, so I'm gonna remove this obviously because it's not related to sermons at all. And in fact, I'm not even gonna use the dump here. Save and close. Okay, and that is basically setting up an admin view. I know I've run around and it seemed quite hectic, and I possibly will redo this video at a certain stage and try to be more structured, but I think it is informative enough. And if you have any questions, please email me and I'll try to communicate with you. And if I see that a certain question comes up often enough, I will add it to this video, possibly redoing this specific area. Admin views is quite intense, and we will possibly revisit many of the concepts that we've looked at already today. Thank you for watching.